MLS Aces Podcast. It is 2025, Jason. We took some time off. We wanted to relax, rejuvenate, get ready for 2025 after what a crazy 2024 it was for Major League Soccer, U.S. soccer, life in general, all of that. We come back. I'm feeling pretty good, but we come back to maybe the most amount of information possible. Before we get into that information, though, Jason, Happy New Year. How are you? What's going on?
Yeah, happy new year to you, to the listeners. I don't know, I feel good. It was a good little break. I think, it's always fun to see the Spotify stuff like that you send out, people listening in different countries or
Yeah.
different areas, regions of the world. It's fun, we've always been doing this. Just, we like talking about it, we like sharing our thoughts. It's fun for us, and I don't know, every year I feel like a little better about it. So
No, I mean, look, this is my. We'll get a little introspective maybe about podcasting and the show and everything. My whole thing is like, I do this for my own sake. I do this because I enjoy talking about Major League Soccer. I do this because I enjoy talking with you, Jason, and getting to meet other people around the U.S. soccer world. I mean, I put out a pre-MLS Cup interview with Ezra Hendrickson, and I get to talk with him sometimes, and that's absolutely amazing. Like, I got to say I shot a text message to the head coach of St. Vincent and the Grenadines and former MLS manager. Like, in the grand scheme of things, like, what did he fucking do? But in my world, in the world of soccer, like, that's cool. That's pretty fucking cool. So what we get to do is, yes, I think a hobby. It's for fun. It's for us just to kind of get our thoughts out there around what's going on around U.S. soccer. But when you look back at it, right, like we hit like over 50 countries last year. We had around 10,000 downloads last year. Like, it's just cool stuff that we get to do and do it for us.
honestly, thanks to the listeners. They're the ones making it possible.
Exactly, right? I think that's the transition that I have in my head is like, it's initially for me to be a little selfish and get my stuff out there, but it's cool to see when people download, when people listen, where they're listening, and everything like that. And for you folks out there who do listen and watch every single week or whatever, whenever you do, because I binge podcast episodes too, so I'm definitely not a weekly listener on my own shows that I listen to. But thank you if you binge, if you watch weekly, whatever. But Jason, we did not actually close out 2024. We had a
I
little bit
know.
of an early break, an early start to our break, just because I got sick. I think work got crazy for the both of us, and again, that's where we are with things. This is not paying the bills, so work does come first and foremost most of the time. But I think we should just say a quick congratulations to the LA Galaxy, 2024 MLS Cup champions, back to the top of the totem pole in Major League Soccer. First club to 6 MLS Cup titles. We'll figure out how they put 6 stars on their badge next year. And it's just cool to see, I think, historically great teams back where, they quote unquote should be. So I'll say that's my little piece for congratulations to the Galaxy.
Yeah, I mean it's cool. I think, like you said, we love to hate certain teams. We love it, or like we hate it when they're great, but also it does kind of feel right, with them being good in the league. It brings like a connection to like the whole history of MLS too, with the Galaxy being good. It's like, oh, okay, there's these new teams coming in. There's Miami, there's LAFC. Um, these expansion teams
Yeah.
coming in trying to make waves. San Diego might be doing it this year, but like it brings us, like, it grounds us a little bit. Like, hey, you're gonna keep coming, but you know what? The Galaxy are gonna keep being there. I mean, there's teams. I mean, Seattle's an expansion team, but they've been around a decent amount, and they're always making people suffer, I guess.
No, I mean, look, I think it's a theme that we're going to probably be trying to carry into 2025, right? Like, clubs of a previous, whatever .0 generation version of Major League Soccer that you want to talk about that are going back and now trying to compete with these new clubs, new scenes on and off the field, these new signings and everything in between, right? Like we saw the Revs break a points record in 2021. Now I think Caleb Porter's trying to do some crazy stuff this offseason. We've seen the Galaxy be irrelevant for a decade. They just won MLS Cup, and now, you know, with and without Ricky Puig, I think have one of the better rosters in the league in general. And I mean, not that this club is as old as the other two that I just named, but Atlanta United making some moves to try to get back to the top of the totem pole that they were in when they arrived into Major League Soccer. And it's going to be stuff that we talk about for, I think, all season, all off season, and we will, I think, dive into it how it comes. But with the old is the new, and the new in Major League Soccer, the new in World Soccer is more competitions, is expanded competitions. And one thing that Major League Soccer teams now are going to have to try to get used to a little bit is the expanded FIFA Club World Cup. And we did get the Club World Cup draw a few weeks ago. Not going to dive super deep into it, but Inter Miami and the Seattle Sounders are the two teams from Major League Soccer involved in this. Miami, the host city, and the Sounders, the Champions Cup winners from 2022, 2021. Forgot the year off my top of my head, but whatever, here we are. So they got invited to the competition. Inter Miami, they're slotted into Group A, and that group consists of FC Porto, Palmeiras, and Al Ahly. Miami, they're going to begin their tournament against Al Ahly down in Miami for the first game of the tournament, just in general. And then the Sounders, they're slotted into Group B, and that consists of PSG, Atletico Madrid, and Botafogo. Their Sounders, they're going to begin their tournament in Seattle against Botafogo. Two very wildly different groups, Jason. Do you think any type of run in this tournament matters? Do you think making it out of the group matters? And do you give either of these teams any type of shout at doing so?
I think it would. I think it does matter making it out of the group. Like, it would matter. But not making out of the group probably wouldn't hurt all that much either. Like, does that make sense?
You do good, it's going to be viewed as good, yes.
If they do well, it's going to be viewed as like, wow, you know, an MLS team is that, especially if this Seattle team, because I think we can agree that's a more difficult group here.
We'll dive into that in a second, but yes.
But like, if they make it out of the group, I think there's a real argument of like, wait, you know, like the whole rest of the world is going to be like, okay, wait a second, you know, that's not even the team that was best in MLS last season. But yeah, I don't remember the second part of your question, but I do think
it was more just kind of, I think, views on the tournament, because look, it could ultimately just end up being 3 games for each of these teams, but it's an additional 3 games that these teams have to play and balance with other competitions and everything else going on, right? So I think that's the point that I think if you're a fan of Seattle, if you're a fan of Miami, you do have to take into consideration for 2025, because we also don't know what Leagues Cup's going to look like. We don't know what the Open Cup's going to look like. And then obviously, you know, Champions Cup and the playoffs are all involved in all of this. So this is the new era of MLS. This is the most games these teams are ever going to play in their history. And, you know, hopefully it's only more and more MLS teams getting involved in this. But
I mean, more eyes and more knowledge of MLS and the teams and the quality. You know, you watch an MLS, you know, Seattle versus Atletico Madrid, and if that ends up, you know, not like, hopefully that's a great game. And if it is, win or lose, if it's a competitive, great game, like it only helps MLS, right? I mean, sure, there's like a situation where it could hurt maybe, but I think I don't know. I think both of the teams, Seattle and Miami, will be able to navigate this tournament, like at least from a personnel level.
Yes. I personally just hope we see an MLS team win a game. One of these two teams just win a game. You know, like it's the Sounders. I'm sorry. You got PSG, the Giants of France, the Giants of the world, Atletico Madrid, one of the other giants of the world, and then Botafogo, who just won Copa Libertadores down in South America. Like, you got absolutely, you know, smacked with a tournament layout here. I don't know if you're picking up a win and or a point. That's all I'm gonna just throw out there. Not doubting you, just being realistic. And then with Miami, I mean, look, I just hope that maybe a win. That's all I want to see in this competition. Have your teams play your 3 games, get on the global scale, maybe have a player impress or score a goal that's unbelievable and move forward. That's what I will leave the Club World Cup at. I don't know if you have anything else you want to finish off with, but
No, I think, just let's not get embarrassed, I guess.
let's
That's
not
it.
lose 10-0 to PSG.
Yeah. Let's make it competitive. That's what I want to see. I don't necessarily care if, I mean, sure, I'd love for them to win, but if it's not there and the quality isn't as high, but I just want it to be competitive at the very least.
Yeah, I completely agree. And in talking about international competition, the CONCACAF Champions Cup, I keep on wanting to go Champions League. CONCACAF Champions Cup, that draw for 2025 got announced. Obviously, I still think I'm still getting used to the expanded version of Champions Cup and all like the buys and stuff like that. So it took me an extra few minutes to really process all of this. But I think just like any of the other years we've seen this expanded competition, on one side of the bracket, there's a lot more MLS teams than the other side of the bracket. And the other side of the bracket has way more Liga MX teams than the other side, all in hopes, I think it's a draw, right? But I think it's all in hopes that you get a Liga MX MLS final, a bunch of money, bunch of eyes, all of that. Jason, is there a side of the bracket, or is there a club in a side of a bracket that you're looking at that you're like, could be a sneaky little run, or kind of shitty that they got paired on that side, or anything like that?
I think there's two things that I would like to mention. First, I kind of, when I first saw this, was really sad about the fact that the Columbus Crew, LAFC, and Inter Miami, only two of those teams can make even the quarterfinals, which is it's unfortunate.
They're playing each other up into the quarterfinals.
Yeah, they're all in the same, what would you call it, like quadrant or whatever, which I think is disappointing from an MLS fan's perspective. Like, I get, the way this all works and whatnot. Like, pretty much all the Canadian teams are also stacked on top of each other.
Yeah.
But it is what it is. I think that's kind of unfortunate, though, because you could argue those are, well, I think it's not really an argument. Those are 3 of the, 5 best teams in MLS. All in that section. But I don't think it's sneaky either. I think the Galaxy have a really good chance at going far. Like, they potentially have a pretty, I don't know if I would say it's easy, but I do think they have one of the easier routes to the final, at least to the semifinal, I would say. So I think the Galaxy would be my pick to who's going to go the furthest. It would be one of those Miami, Columbus, LAFC, whichever one can come out of that section. Will be in a great spot in I think the Galaxy in that bottom half.
Look, it's on paper, it's super easy to kind of maybe just pick your way through whatever. I think it's kind of aligned for the Galaxy and for Tigres to be in a quarterfinal, for Seattle, and then either Chivas, Club America, or Cruz Azul to be in the other quarterfinal. Mm-hmm. On the other side, it's one of LAFC, Inter Miami, Columbus in one of the quarterfinals against probably most likely one of those other 2 teams that I just mentioned. And then on that other quarterfinal, it's Monterrey or it's Pumas. Most likely I'd probably go with Monterrey. I don't probably them playing each other ultimately in that quarterfinal, unless Vancouver somehow kind of, makes a run out of nowhere.
That would be crazy. The way it's set up, though, the quarterfinals are all going to be bangers.
The quarterfinals are going to be unbelievable. Liga MX versus MLS, and probably some interleague matchups there as well. But I think it's going to leave it where if you're making a final out of this run, out of these competition, out of these matchups, you're very well deserving. Not that other people who make the finals aren't deserving, but these competitions, these matchups are going to be a ton of fun to watch. So not much to really break down here. Obviously, as an MLS podcast, you hope an MLS team makes it back to a final, wins a final, kind of follows up on what Seattle did a few years ago. But we will leave the competition predictions there, Jason.
Also, we're already like less than a month away from the start of these games.
Training camp is in like a week or two. So,
Yeah.
I think it's a week. So here we are. Let's keep moving forward. Let's start talking about managerial changes, managerial hires, and everything like that. Let's start with Atlanta, where we can talk about probably two hires at the same exact time here. But Atlanta United, first, they did hire their chief soccer officer and sporting director in Chris Henderson, who's coming over from Inter Miami. I think they technically had to like send over a super draft pick for Henderson, but whatever. Henderson was the technical director at the Seattle Sounders from 2008 until the end of the 2020 MLS season. Then in 2021, he joined Miami as their chief soccer officer and sporting director. He won 4 U.S. Open Cup titles with Seattle, 2 Supporter Shields in his career, 1 with Seattle, 1 with Miami, 2 MLS Cup titles with Seattle, and then a Leagues Cup title with Miami. Pretty much, Chris Henderson knows how to build a competitive winning roster in Major League Soccer. And now he's with Garth Lagerwey. Now he's with Arthur Blank, Arthur Blank's checkbook as well. And, the reputation of Atlanta United. They also went out and hired their next manager in club history, Ronny Deila. Obviously, if you were an MLS fan for a few years now, you know the name Ronny Deila. If you're a New York City FC fan, you know the name Ronny Deila. Since leaving New York City, where he won MLS Cup at in the 2021 season, he's managed Standard Liège, Club Brugge, and Al Wada. In the Middle East. He also has managed a few other clubs in his career, but most notably Celtic over in Scotland. He's won the Belgian Pro League. He's won MLS Cup. He's won Scottish Premier League titles and various cups all in between. Ronny Deila, again, just like Chris Henderson, just like Garth Lagerwey, is a dude who knows how to win and is a proven winner within Major League Soccer. Jason, what do you think of this marriage of coaches and front office members and everything going on right now at Atlanta United?
I mean, this is like a power core or whatever. Like, I don't even know what to call it. Like, this is Garth Lagerwey. I think we've spent a long time talking about everywhere he goes, he's successful, right? Obviously, Chris Henderson, the achievements speak for themselves. Like, where he goes, he's successful.
Yeah.
Deila, like, successful, won in this league before as well, which I think is a huge boost. Like, he's not unfamiliar with the travel. He's not unfamiliar with the players, the type of play, anything about it, the money, whatever you want to claim. He's familiar with it, and he has succeeded. So yeah. I think where we talk about Atlanta as like a whole going into the playoffs last year, and the whole season last year was like a lot of sales. So a lot of big name players out. Signings that were clearly successful and had great back half of the seasons really seemed to mesh as the year went on and actually get pretty like familiar with the league and all that. It takes time, I think. A lot of players take time to adjust. It didn't seem like it took them as long as maybe some others, but they're setting themselves up to be very competitive in this season. And I think, we'll see more moves from them. We'll see interesting they're going to put their stamp on this pretty quickly. And yeah, I'd be afraid of Atlanta at this point.
I think Atlanta has every right for people to be scared of them, especially because there are 2 DP holes open on this roster. If it's anything like what we've seen from Garth Lagerwey or Chris Henderson teams in the past, most likely one more will be signed this winter and then one in the summer, which is just the way that they've won and been successful with in the past. I'm going to assume one of them is also a DP striker because that is clearly the biggest hole right now left on the roster. But
that's a golden boot, whoever they get right there.
That's Jason Gold. His golden boot pick already.
As long as he's there all season. Hey, I think I would have hit Giacomo if he was there for the whole year.
You can get a year before Atlanta's going to sell out for $20 million. Look, you have Moranchuk in the middle, who I think he is still slowly adapting, kind of like what you mentioned, Jason. Pedro Amador at left back. I mean, I will hammer it home. I think he could be the best left back in all of MLS next year. You have Saba, who is now on a TAM deal, who I think if he's your 4th best player by the end of the 2025 regular season, Atlanta United's in a great spot, and I think he could be. This team's on fire, and I know we're going to talk about transfers later on, so I don't want to I mean, we can dive a little bit into it, but this team's already making moves, right? They sold Santiago Sosa to Racing Club down in Argentina. They got $4 million up front for him, a potential for another $2.5 million on top of it. And this is for a dude who really wasn't great with Atlanta, who's been on loan, impressed on loan, and they've made a few $1 million off of him, right? And then obviously, I think the biggest move so far this offseason is bringing in Mateus Click from DC United, who is not going to occupy a DP spot for Atlanta. He was a DP for DC. DC's picking up part of his contract, which Atlanta absolutely fleeced that deal that they're doing that. And now you add a experienced former Poland international who's won before, who has, I think, looked good in MLS. I don't think he's been DP level, but I think he's been a very good central midfielder. Pairing all of that together and giving some of these guys another year to adapt to the league, I think Atlanta United are going to be scary. Yes, they need to make that 9 signing, but Deila, Henderson, Garth, Miranchuk, Saba, all these guys, it's going to make for, I think, a very fun team in 2025. I don't think still top 3 right now, but I think they can be.
I mean, I think if you are a top 3 team, we're talking like Miami, Columbus, Cincinnati, probably.
Yeah.
Like, they're looking at that going, we may need to improve more, though. Like, I think you're looking at Atlanta now going, they're I think they were solidly on the outside looking in. They might not be on the outside anymore. They might be kind of 1 foot into that little group there. And, I mean, we'll see, like you said, some more signings come through and actually how it ends up working on the field. But I think the backbone of their team, their front office, like they're set up to really have a lot of success because they have a lot of people who know what they're doing. And as long as those people can work together and get along, then I don't really see a downside to any of that.
Yeah, and there's already historical proof that at least Garth and Chris Henderson have worked together and won together. So there's that. All right, let's move forward. Let's leave Atlanta. Let's go to Philadelphia. The Union, they have hired their next manager after the departure of Jim Curtin earlier this offseason. Bradley Carnell, the next manager of the Philadelphia Union. The 47-year-old South African manager was most recently managing St. Louis City, where he led them to an overall record of 22 wins, 15 draws, and 25 losses in 62 games in charge. He also led them to a first-place finish in the Western Conference in their first ever season not too many years ago. He also was an interim manager for the New York Red Bulls and a longtime assistant manager for the New York Red Bulls as well as interim manager. He did go 6 wins, 3 draws, and 5 losses in 14 games in charge there. This is maybe one of the most Union hires possible. Nothing against Bradley Carnell. I like Bradley Carnell as a manager, and I think he did enough with St. Louis to deserve a shot somewhere else. But the Union were not going out and making that splash. Ernst Tanner definitely is the type of general manager who he wants to kind of run the team, and he wants someone who's very much in agreement with how he runs the team to operate like that, which is totally fair, and that's his spot as general manager of this team. The Union want to develop young talent and work with young talent. Bradley Carnell has done that and been successful in that in the past within the Red Bull organization. He wants a guy who can kind of punch above his weight class as well because they don't want to be the top spenders in the league. Carnell did that with St. Louis City as well. The marriage of this hire to this club makes total sense. In saying all of that, I don't know, and I don't know. This is not a step forward improvement-wise from Jim Curtin, and where I think Jim Curtin, even though he missed the playoffs last year, left this team. That's where I'm going to leave my thoughts.
I think it could be, but probably from more of a I agree. I think the Union in general are, I don't know if structured is the right word, but probably one of the more structured MLS clubs in operation, just the way they do things. I didn't expect a splashy move. That's I didn't expect some eye-popping, whoa, that's what's coming here. This does feel very much like a Union move, but I don't actually think that's necessarily a bad thing. And I don't know, I think new ideas, new leadership in the coaching situation, I don't know if that's necessarily a downside. I agree. It's not the splash. It's not the, oh man, I could see them massively improving. I don't know, but like I don't think it's necessarily like a bad thing. They were with Jim Curtin for so long. I think we saw a ton of success during they're one of the more successful MLS clubs outside of like trophies won, which I guess you could say like, okay, maybe not, but like they're one of the more consistently solid, I guess, teams in MLS, and I don't think this takes them out of that. And I think they like being in that, where every couple years maybe they do make a run at MLS Cup or at the Supporter Shield or something. But I think they're happy being good, like top half. And I don't know. I think there's a larger conversation within MLS right now. It's like we have these. It's a little top heavy, or maybe it feels top heavy, but also at the same time we see upsets still. Like in my opinion, I would argue that there's obviously great teams and teams doing things on different levels. But it's at any given time, like any year, I don't feel confident saying this team was 100% going to win, or like even the playoffs, we saw tons of upsets. I think MLS still has that kind of parity. Maybe it's decreasing, but I think that like the larger conversation around MLS is like, oh, it's and I think we agree a little bit. It's like, oh, it's Columbus, it's Miami, it's LAFC, the Galaxy, Cincinnati, even like there's these teams that are kind of just a class above, and then there's some teams kind of in tier B, and then C and D and E, or make it what you want. But I don't know. I think there's still a lot of parity is my point.
I think parity is still alive. Parity still exists. I mean, take a look at what Atlanta and the Red Bulls did in the playoffs last year, right? Like the Red Bulls were the better team in the second half of MLS Cup. There's a world where if maybe Andres Reyes isn't puking before the game and he's starting at center back, the Red Bulls win that game. Maybe one of the mistakes in goal at the back don't happen for the Red Bulls, and they pull out a victory or whatever it may be. Parity is still alive. I think parity is still alive to an extent. I don't think it's, especially now with what are we at, 30 teams. I don't think you can always say that
no.
that the 30th team, even if they have the worst record in the league, can go out and be the first or beat the best team in the league. I don't think that still exists, but I think in terms of classes, it still exists. I think a good team that maybe is like a lower tiered playoff team can maybe go out and beat a Columbus, a Miami, an LAFC, a Galaxy, any given week, sure. But I don't think, in last year's San Jose Earthquakes team, I don't think they're going out and beating Columbus. That's where parity is dying a little bit.
I think to tie it back to Philly, though, it's like in their case, they are kind of one of those teams that on any given week, they could upset one of these top tier teams. And I think they like being in that spot. I don't think I don't want to pick on I'll pick on the Fire. I don't think the Fire are going to go out there and just start wiping the floor with Miami. But I don't know. I think there's these tiers of MLS, but there's still movement. There's a lot of movement.
For sure.
But I do think MLS as a whole is sort of pushing itself towards less parity, whether they want to be or not. It feels like we're going towards some clubs just, I don't know, having a bit of an.
I agree. I think, but that's where I think it's honestly just the pure number of teams makes it difficult. But yes, I think you are correct with the Union. I don't think this is a bad hire. I don't think Bradley Carnell, honestly, I don't think he's going to fail with the Union. I think he's probably going to be a good team that's going to develop youth talent, that's going to get them on the field. They'll probably get a bunch of GAM for it when you sell players and transfer it all into usable GAM. And he'll probably win some games. Maybe he wins an Open Cup in 2 years, and we'll see.
It's not a high risk move, which is I think your point. Like it's a very Philly move in that they're not going to go probably hire a new coach in 6 months or a year and a half. Like it's more of that consistent he's probably going to be there for a few years, if not 5 or whatever.
Yeah.
But
I was
because it
gonna
is
say,
kind of like a safe move.
I could see it being Curtin 2.0. He's around for the next decade. I could see.
Well, yeah, I don't know. Like it could, but like
Yes.
it's a safe move. It's a safer move, I think, than maybe some people want, but it's kind of a Philly move, which isn't a bad thing. I'm clear it's not a bad thing.
No, saying something is Philly is not necessarily a bad thing. There's room for improvement, in my opinion, but it is not bad. I think plenty of teams and plenty of organizations and clubs and fans would like their team to operate like the Philadelphia Union. So that is where I think we'll leave that. Let's dive into the last managerial hiring so far. There's still like 2 open jobs or something like that, if I'm not mistaken. I don't know. My brain's everywhere with all this MLS news. But New York City FC, they've hired Pascal Jansen as their next manager following the departure of Nick Cushing earlier this offseason. The 51-year-old Dutch manager was most recently managing Ferencváros. I don't know if I nailed that, in Hungary, in which he finished with a record of 18 wins, 6 draws, and 6 losses in 30 games. The only other club that he has managed in his career before his time in Hungary was, not just, but AZ Alkmaar in the Eredivisie, where he managed 162 games at AZ with a record of 96 wins, 24 draws, and 42 losses. Janssen famously got AZ to the UEFA Conference League semifinals against West Ham, where they lost across 2 legs there. But he also has managed in the Europa League during his time in Hungary, because Ferencváros, they're the goats of Hungary. Like they're the top team that you want to manage, be a fan of, play for if you're talking about Hungarian soccer. I'll take it, I guess, since I'm the NYCFC fan here on the pod. I love it. I mean, looking at purely just the dude's European record, or whatever, it is European, but had his managerial record in general. I mean, he's won a majority of the games that he has managed, and that is something you like to see. The losses and the draws aren't that far apart in number, which I think is always a good thing. He's obviously impressed enough across 2 different leagues, and I'm talking outside of the big 5 leagues in Europe. He's managed 2 of the larger teams outside of those big 5 leagues, which impressed City Football Group enough to get this guy in. And I think if City Football Group or Red Bull Group, or if one of those larger conglomerates of soccer out there are looking at you and want to bring you into the organization, that means that means there's something there, that there's talent there. Giving him this opportunity, I think, to work with a talented New York City roster, it is a talented roster, is an interesting one. And I am hoping that he brings that excellence that he has shown to New York City. And we're having the same conversation with Atlanta, right? I think hopefully propelling New York City back into, that top of the Eastern Conference conversation. They're in that middle pack right now, and I think there's a lot of young talent, a lot of fun talent. This talent needs to be developed. This talent needs to get on the field. It's something that I think Nick Cushing was lacking in his last half a season to last full season last year. I have hopes for Jansen to be the next big time coach that New York City has had, because we've hit on more of our coaches than we haven't. So I will take that.
Yeah. I mean, I don't really have a whole lot to add. I think Eredivisie is a good league. I think getting a guy with, like you said, a very good record for wins and losses and draws across both of his clubs is impressive. But yeah, I mean, I think, like you're saying, NYCFC, whatever they're trying to call it nowadays.
It's just a name of the city with an FC at the end, Jason. That's it.
It's just New York City now.
It's New York City. That's it.
But anyway, I think they're, like you said, kind of like in that. I think they're not middle tier. I think they're like, I don't know. I would probably put them in tier B or something, like the second tier, I guess, like a playoff team that's not top 4, maybe, like maybe not home playoff team, but
yeah, that's fair. That's fine.
Yeah.
I agree with it.
So
right. The one, and I'll just get the one I think notable New York City transfer off the board here, and just quickly mention James Sands, who's going out on loan to FC St. Pauli in the Bundesliga. It's a 6-month loan where St. Pauli has the option to extend the loan for I think another 6 months if they want to. Sands did something similar to this a few years ago when he went on loan to Rangers in the Scottish Premier League. It seems very much that, this is NYCFC as an organization kind of doing Sands a favor. He wants the European shot. I think he's deserving of a European shot. I know when he was at Rangers, he impressed. There was a managerial change. Things kind of didn't work out after that. So he came back. And, he's one of the best D-mids in the league. He's still under 25. I think he has a shot to be a good Bundesliga type player. So I'm rooting for the kid. It sucks to see him go. I think him and Keaton Parks were a pretty good midfield pairing, but that is, I guess, soccer and being a soccer fan. So
for him, he probably just wants more experience as a USMNT kind of like middle-aged, younger player. I'm sure he wants to put his name in the hat for the World Cup. So
yeah, right. He wants to be the guy behind Tyler Adams. I think he can be, and I think that's a completely fair conversation. But obviously, you see what Pulisic's doing, McKennie, all these guys are playing week in and week out in Europe, and it doesn't have to be specifically in Europe. Pochettino's said that he just wants to see guys playing. If Sands feels like his best shot is playing week in and week out in the Bundesliga, that's totally fair, and I give it to him. So hopefully it works out. If it doesn't, though, I'll be happy to see him back in a New York City jersey. That's all I'll say. Let's move to the last big news point before we start talking about some transfers. The primary ownership group of the Vancouver Whitecaps have announced that they are in the process of selling the club, according to multiple reports online. And, Tom Bogert being one of the bigger ones, the group is trying to not sell the club to an ownership group that is going to move them out of the city of Vancouver. This is an interesting conversation because I think there's actually a lot here to it that necessarily people may not think about. It is not often that a professional soccer team gets put up for sale. It's not often that one that's already established gets put up for sale, right? This isn't an expansion and we're doing the whole San Diego thing or Charlotte or Austin a few years ago or everything like that, right? This is an opportunity for someone who is a millionaire, billionaire, group of millionaires, whatever, to come in and own something, right? Now, the Whitecaps, to all case in points, aren't the biggest club in their market. They don't typically do well. I mean, they just had their home playoff game moved because of a motocross event not too many months ago, and they don't own their own stadium, so that would be something else that gets put into into the conversation as well. Tom Bogert said this on Soccer Wise, their kind of him and David Goss's podcast and platform, talking around all things MLS. There isn't typically, if you're a millionaire in a city that, it lives in that city, values that city, is from that city, whatever, and you are already not involved in sports ownership or soccer ownership, there's a reason why. You either don't want to be involved in it or, I guess opportunities hasn't always arrived. So I don't know how many millionaires around Vancouver that aren't already involved in maybe some kind of sports ownership, or the Whitecaps already, are out there that is going to keep this club in Vancouver. I'm leaning more towards this club move cities than not, but obviously we're in an early stage process for all of this.
Yeah, I mean, I think that would be a real shame. Like, I would be very disappointed. But yeah, I mean, I don't know if I have a huge amount to add because it is so early. But yeah, I mean, I would be a big proponent of them not moving. I think for a lot of reasons. But I mean, this team is like a pretty decent team too. It's not like we're talking about a bad team, or like a horrible team. There's stuff there to work with. But yeah, I don't want them to move. I doubt most people there want them to move. I honestly don't think most MLS fans want them to move. So kind of is what it is.
I'm in full agreement with you. I do not want to see this organization move from the city of Vancouver, but we've seen owners in the past, i.e. what happened with Columbus and Austin and that ownership and everything like that, right?
And we saw the response to that.
Yes, and I think the Vancouver, if things start to happen, the Vancouver Whitecaps fans and the people of that city would need to probably have a similar response, because if you're Don Garber, if you're other owners, and you see an opportunity where, I don't know, maybe some millionaires in Vegas are interested and want to bring the Vancouver Whitecaps to Vegas, I'm sure millionaires want to make more money and see that as a good business opportunity. So we'll see how this all unfolds. Obviously, there is a World Cup coming in 2026, and the Vancouver, not the Whitecaps, sorry, Vancouver is a host city for the FIFA World Cup. So we'll see how all of that plays a factor as well, which honestly could be a factor that I think maybe keeps this club in Vancouver, but we will see. Jason, that is all like the super big news that I think we had to cover. Are you ready to talk transfers?
Let's do it.
All right. We talked Atlanta a little bit. Do you want to, just for listener's sake too, I think we're going to try to do our best to go team by team and talk about any moves that we feel like are big, important, impactful, all that fun stuff. So we talked about Atlanta. We'll just go alphabetically. Jason, do you want to start with Austin?
Yeah, and I think there's a pretty big one. I think you could argue that all the moves that they've made have been pretty solid. I think
Giassi's out. What?
Zarda's out, I think, is solid. I mean, I've never been one of the Zarda's haters that I think he has many of.
Yes.
I feel like I've thought of higher of him than most, but that's kind of besides the point. Him being out is a good thing considering they're bringing in Brandon Vazquez, right? And I think that's the headline. Brandon Vazquez coming from Monterey back to MLS to Austin. I was actually trying to think about moves like this because it feels like a very MLS specific thing where a guy leaves, comes back shortly after to a different MLS team, like a similar Lucho Acosta type move. I don't know. I think it's kind of funny because it seems like it happens in MLS more than elsewhere. I could be wrong about that. Like I guess most leagues are. I don't know. Whatever.
No, I got you.
I also think that Ilie Sanchez in move is pretty big. I think towards the end of last season, we spent a decent amount of time talking about Austin and in their signings and their, I guess, like plan of improvement. And this is just right along with that. I think it's totally them going, honestly, like similar to Atlanta a little bit and going, we want to be part of that, party at the top, right? And how do we get there? That's to make big moves. And Brandon Vazquez is a huge move like that. We know what he can do. We've seen what he can do. He had a solid season for Monterey. So yeah.
I definitely agree with Brandon Vazquez for sure, especially with the rumors and the reports of Sebastian Driussi may not be there for 2025, kind of continuing to circle. Austin are going to need a proven, definite goal scorer, especially if Driussi's not there and Vazquez is that guy. He's proven to be that guy pretty much everywhere he's gone. He was unbelievable at Cincinnati, a best 11 type player at Cincinnati. And then obviously Monterrey, I mean, he was good. I think obviously there's just super high expectations at Monterrey, but it's not like the guy didn't score goals or contribute to goals that,
I personally am happy to see him back in MLS.
Yeah. And I think, I don't think this is all World Cup Pochettino focused, right? I think this is a lot of money that Brandon Vazquez is probably going to be making year in and year out down in Austin. But I think being a regular starter and being a leader and being the dude, where at Monterrey he's not the guy, could potentially try to be something that also helps his USMNT stock heading into 2026. I mean, he's 26 years old. He's played at some of the bigger clubs in the region in recent years, and I think that is definitely something that completely makes this signing well worth it. I don't know. I'm all for it, and I think Brandon Vazquez is going to score a ton because we saw a lot of Osman Bankari on the wing. The dude likes to create out from the wing. And I think, again, if Vazquez is sitting in the middle of all of that, it's going to be successful. And then with Ilie, I mean, yes, he's 34 years old. I've openly said it on this podcast, on social media. I think Ilie has taken a step back, not in quality, but I think in just his speed, right? Like the speed of the game and kind of everything going on around him. In saying that, he was still a very good defensive midfielder for LAFC last year. He's won constantly wherever he's gone in this league. And I think pairing him in a lower midfield block with, either Venezuelan international Danny Pereira or Owen Wolf, who's been a super exciting, fun, young talent coming up. I think pairing him with a very mobile young player, as those two guys are, it is going to be a benefit and to his game. So I'm excited for it. I think Ilie will be himself, be successful, be good, and I think Brandon Vazquez has the potential opportunity to I think be great down in Austin, be a best 11 type player again, and I'm here for it. All right, let's keep it moving. Charlotte hasn't done anything yet. There's heavy reports of Miguel Almiron. We'll talk about it when and if it happens. Jason, I mean, I can introduce this, but do you want to talk about the Fire? Anything that has happened with the Chicago Fire?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's a few things. I don't want to spend too much time, but
why? They're the fun conversation right now. The Fire.
I actually do think this is fun. I just don't want to take too much. Yeah, I mean, I don't want. Yeah, it is fun. I think that Jack Elliott, a guy from Philly who I just spent a lot of time talking about the consistency of Philly in the club and the way they operate. He's coming to a club that does not have consistency or great operation history. But maybe he can bring some of that consistency over. I think Greg making moves is interesting to me. It's big. I think Jimenez out. Gaston, see ya. I'm sorry, but it wasn't enough. It never was. We paid him way too much money.
He was a DP.
And he did not play up to that standard.
Yes.
To say it nicely. I think the new winger we got, Philip Zingarnagel from Club Brugge, is another guy that a lot of games played, a lot of goals and assists too. So I think bringing him in, pairing him up with, Brian Gutierrez, Kuipers, I like
Selassie, whoever.
Yeah, Haile Selassie. I think he got re-signed, or
he's back.
Yeah. So I think the attack's actually starting to look kind of interesting. So yeah, I'm excited to see what they look like on the field. I think there's probably a few more moves to be made. I don't necessarily know. But where they're at now, but I felt pretty good about the Fire before, so I try not to get too far ahead of myself. Look, although under Greg, it could be a little bit better, a little bit more interesting.
I think it should be. I think it will be. I think the Fire probably also have some money in their pocket that they're willing to spend, especially after, getting out of everything with Shaqiri, Gaston Jimenez, like you mentioned. That's a big salary and a DP spot off the books. So I think the Fire will be okay. I will just say I like the trends that they're kind of promoting some homegrown talent, some Fire team talent. I think you're valuing talented youth that have been proving it and deserving of a shot. Just shout out Omari Glasgow. He's a 21-year-old winger. He is a Guyana international. He has 25 goal contributions and 29 caps at 21 years old. I know Guyana is not any type of powerhouse in the world in CONCACAF, anything like that. That's just an impressive record, and I just have to call that out for the listeners of this podcast. But I think the moves in have been good. I think the players and especially the salaries on the out have been great. And we'll continue to monitor what the Fire.
I will say, the Fire's system has performed pretty well. Has set up some younger players for a lot of success, and we've seen it. So.
And you guys have made your money off those players too. Yeah. Shout out to John Duran and Chris Brady.
Let's come back. Well, Chris Brady's still there.
Sorry, I mean, Gaga. not Chris Brady. Chris Brady's gone soon. Don't worry. All right.
I am worried.
FC Cincinnati. We've talked already this, a few episodes ago when the news broke on Kevin Denke, their new DP MLS record signing. We won't probably talk about him right now, but Cincinnati did make a wild. It was a pretty shocking trade to me. They sent Chidozie Awaziem and Ian Murphy to the Colorado Rapids for a deal in total of $1 million in GAM plus potential add-ons. I mean, Ian Murphy played 100 games for Cincinnati. Awaziem was a summer signing for Cincinnati, kind of someone that was talked about as he's part of the long-term plans. They've been looking at him for a while, and I thought he played pretty well for half a season. Both of those guys are going over to Colorado. They're getting a bunch of GAM back, and Cincinnati is sitting in a spot still where they have to figure out what's going on with Lucho. They got to figure out what's going on a little bit, I think, in-house, and then maybe we'll see what's going on. But Cincinnati, that's all I've really got. I don't know if you want to add anything.
I mean, I just loop that into the Colorado conversation as well, basically. But
you can just roll that over if you want.
I will say that the striker signing for Cincinnati is one of the major things they needed to get done, and they did. So I still personally think the Lucho is the biggest kind of signing or whatever that they're going to be making this offseason. So whatever happens there, again, I'll reiterate, is still the top of my mind. But yeah, I mean, and then Colorado, I think adding more talent to a Colorado team that has started to kind of mix it up a little bit. They started to kind of improve. Chris Armas has them going in the right direction. I think injuries ultimately derailed them, but this is a team that was it was a home playoff team for most of the season, or towards the end until it kind of wheels fell off. But yeah, more talent for them.
I mean, I am completely now drawing a blank on the center back that they sold to League last summer, and it's going to absolutely kill me. Talked about him I love them. It's Canadian international. Everyone knows who I'm talking about. My brain really is just.
Oh no! Yeah. Wow.
Yeah. This is what happens when we take 2 weeks off.
No, I'm gonna be mad.
Jason's gonna look it up, but they sold him last summer for a bunch of money. They also lost Wallace Abubakar with the end of the year decision that they made on him to not bring him back. So the additions of Chidozie Awaziem and Ian Murphy, I mean, are huge. I think Awaziem probably steps immediately into a starting center back role, into a back four or a back three, kind of whatever Armas goes with. Ian Murphy is a guy who can spot start, be a starter, be a rotational piece. We've seen it. He's a good, he's, I think, still not in his prime type center back. So I like the additions there for the Rapids, and I think they needed to make center back signings. They did 2 with 1 move, and
Moise Bombito.
Thank you, Jesus.
Moise Bombito. It took me longer to search than I wanted it to. I don't know why we both forgot that.
Well, since the sale of Bombito last summer, I don't think they've had a capable. I think maybe that's where the decline started to happen a little bit, because he was playing best 11 type stuff for half a season with Colorado. Awaziem and Ian Murphy should, I think, help lessen the loss of Bombito from last summer. But let's keep it moving, Jason. Columbus haven't really done anything. They re-signed Evan Bush. Shout out Evan Bush. I mean, you got to love him. Dallas have been busy. They've made some signings in bringing up some younger talent, like a Pedrinho, who just won MLS Next Pro with North Texas. I mean, the dude scored a bunch, all that fun stuff, right? But they are kind of doing the typical Dallas thing of finding inter-MLS pieces. Eric Quill is figuring it out, I think, in his first season in charge. To me, the biggest signing is that Shaq Moore move from Nashville, pretty much getting a USMNT quality right back inside of MLS for about $150,000 if all incentives hit. I know he's on a little bit of a larger salary. He is 28 years old, but Shaq Moore is a good player ultimately at the end of the day, and Dallas's back line was trash in 2024. And the biggest thing that they need to do is try to help, I think, figure that out first. And Shaq Moore is a part of that. I mentioned Lalas Abubakar. They picked him up in free agency as well. I think those are two pieces that will help continue to try to fix what Dallas's defense was in 2025. So
yeah, I mean, I was just going to add the Lalas Abubakar as well. Just their back line is not very deep. It's not very strong. These are very, very necessary moves for them. That's kind of what these are. Like, yeah, they're great moves. I think solid MLS players, like you said, kind of in inter MLS moves, which I think Dallas likes. But it's out of need a little bit as well. So
yeah,
addressing
and
needs is a great thing to do.
exactly. And Anderson Julio, I think, is a move like that as well. He had 14 goal contributions for RSL last year. You get him for Sam Junqua and a few $100,000 in GAM, and here you are. So Anderson Julio, another cool inter MLS move that I think just makes sense for Dallas. And we will talk about the giant rumors circling of Jesus Ferreira when that gets official. Probably when we drop this episode, it'll be official and the news will be old, but here we are. So we will talk about Jesus Ferreira once it has been announced, officially done, all that fun stuff. Let's go on to DC United. Jason, do you want to start here? Because DC's been interesting.
I think the biggest thing is how are they gonna fill Mateus Cliche leaving? And I mean they've made a lot of moves, a couple goalie additions here, but and Jordan Farr and Luis Barraza. But
well,
I do think
they did waive all 4 goalkeepers at the end of last season, so you did got to rebuild that room a little bit.
A lot of these moves are need, and I think like Jose Kijima is probably somewhat the replacement. Not a lot of career games though, and selected during the expansion draft. So we'll see, right? And traded to I didn't even read that. Traded to DC for $400K in GAM. So yeah, they probably want him to be a major player next season.
Yeah, I think Kojima's probably what Lasane's hoping is the click replacement on the field. I mean, he had a good rookie campaign. He played well for St. Louis. I'll leave it at that. That's
Lucas
all.
McNaughton as well coming in, I think is a good move. Again, just kind of builds more depth, more players in is good for DC. This is another team that's sort of on the cusp, I would say, of playoffs. They're probably going to need to make another signing, though, for me to be more confident.
And apparently there's reports, rumors that more signings are coming. Look, it takes time, I think, for a manager or a general manager to like completely revamp a roster. And I think Troy Lesesne, this is what his second or third transfer window in order to try to do that. I think you got to give Troy Lesesne a little bit of time. DC's not going to go out and spend a shit ton of money like we see at other clubs around the league. The only other thing that I did just want to mention, they did sell Matai Akamboni, their 18-year-old homegrown center back and current U.S. Youth International, to Bournemouth in the Premier League for $2.5 million on the upfront, plus some add-ons that could, spike the deal as well. He played 11 games for DC last year, had an assist. One of those players that I never really, I guess, got a chance to break into the first team, but he is super talented. His youth international play is kind of speaking for itself, and here we are. Let's keep it moving. Houston, they signed Jimmy Maurer. Shout out Cosmos. That's all I'll say there. But Sporting Kansas City, Jason, Alan Pulido gone. Their record signing from 2020 is gone. The 33-year-old Mexican international striker is going to Chivas Guadalajara. I have not seen any reports about what that number looks like. Probably doesn't really matter just because it clears up a bunch of salary numbers for SKC, clears up a DP spot for SKC. And this team, I think, is in full rebuild mode. But what do you make of, I guess, maybe SKC or the Pulido sale?
I mean, I think the Pulido sale was necessary. It's kind of like end of an era type sale. And it was time, I think. Kansas City, like, they're another one of those teams that I don't feel like is going to just go out there and sign like some splashy player. It's funny because like players they promoted or whatever to 16-year-olds from their academy, which is just like such a Kansas City thing to do. And I feel like they're going to be good. They're going to be good. So, I mean, that's probably the route they're going. It's more of a rebuild year, see what we have. But I don't expect them to be like jumping off the page.
No, I think this is, I think to me, I feel like they finally accepted that they're in a rebuild stage. So now it's like we need 2 windows to see what the rebuild looks like. But it's taken long enough for them to get to that point. All right, let's move to the reigning MLS Cup champions, the LA Galaxy. Been an interesting offseason so far. They've traded MLS Cup MVP Gaston Brugman to Nashville SC for Sean Davis, kind of a not like for like, but a midfield for midfield trade there. But I think the more important or more interesting move to talk about is trading Jalen Neal to CF Montreal for $650,000 in GAM, an international roster spot, and a sell-on percentage. Obviously a homegrown talent. He has now a few caps with the USMNT, played 24 games for the Galaxy last year, but kind of lost his starting spot to Garces once Garces kind of broke into the team and looked like a really strong center back next to Maya Yoshida. People were freaking out about it. It kind of made sense to me, though.
I don't love the moves they've made so far, just from a standpoint of like, I don't know. I feel like these are pretty big pieces for them. I don't think they're just like moving forward in retooling in this season. But yeah, you win MLS Cup. There's always changes. I just feel like these changes aren't my favorite. I don't. Is Puig going to be out for half the year next season potentially? Right? Like, I don't know. I don't love the moves. I think they need. I don't know what their back line is going to look like, and that kind of concerns me because it's something that I already was concerned with. It obviously didn't end up mattering at the end of the day, but they're probably still going to score a shitload, so it's fine.
Look, I think Garces is going to be the player that they're kind of now building that back line around. A young South American who came in and did well. Obviously, they still have to have bodies there, so signings will be coming for the LA Galaxy, but we will.
Well, that's the thing. It's like it's hard to talk about the Galaxy in these moves necessarily without knowing what is coming because, like, Jalen Neal out is potentially horrible, but it might not matter, right? Like,
yeah, fair. And I think Montreal, and we'll get to Montreal when we get to that, but I think they got a big time talent. Let's stick in LA.
Oh, I'm excited to talk about Montreal. Yeah,
let's go to LAFC. It has been an interesting window. I'm also a little down on LAFC after this window. Yes, they've re-signed Aaron Long and Marlon, 2 center backs, that were part of the Open Cup winning team last year. They went out. They made a big splash with Jeremy Ebobisse, who I think is going to play that Kai Kamara role. I think he's going to be a spot starter, also probably primary backup striker to Giroud, which, it is a great role for him because I think Ebobisse could be a starter on plenty of other teams. But they did have to sell Omar Campos back to Liga MX. They got a little over $4 million for him, selling him to Cruz Azul. They also did sell an academy product that never made it to the first team, Bajang Dorbo, a current U.S. youth international, to Bayern Munich, and they got $1.5 million for him. Played primarily with LAFC 2 last year and all of that. So they've made some money in, which is good, right? LAFC, they need to sell and make money in transfers just like anyone else. But in terms of what the roster looks like and potentially LAFC wanting to be what they say they want to be in Major League Soccer, I'm not sold that they're good right now.
Yeah, I think the expectations of LAFC are hurting them a little bit here because you like, as opposed to the teams that aren't really that splashy, LAFC is kind of splashy usually. We do expect some higher profile things to happen. I personally think that Ebobisse move is a really solid one. I think
I love it.
Yeah. Like I think he, like you said, is going to play that Kai Kamara role, but I think he is a little younger. Actually a lot younger.
I think he'll do the Kai Kamara role, but even better, which is crazy. Yeah. Kai Kamara was good last year.
Yeah, and I think like what concerns me is like the team is still good, right? Their starting 11 is still top tier.
Yes.
Is there a Griezmann move? Like, I mean, it's heavily rumored. It feels like they're just waiting for that. I don't really I don't really know what they want to do, but they've made a lot of money and they haven't really spent a lot of money at all. So, and this isn't a team that's just going to sit. Like, I think they've proven that they're not content being okay or good, even good.
Yeah.
They want to be competing for trophies every single season. So prove it, right? And I think that reputation is hurting them, at least in this conversation right now, because it doesn't look like they're actually trying to do that. So,
I mean, it's fair because, like, I think you tack on the loss of Omar Campos and you tack that on with Luis O'Brien out, Edward Atuesta out, Ilie out, Jesus Murillo out, right? It's not just like, oh, they made a few sales and they need to replace that talent. Like, they let a lot of talent walk outside of some of these transfers. The starting 11, still great, but, a team's more than just the starting 11. You need depth, you need rotation. Is Kiki Oliveira going to be there, or is that sale going to come through? Is Mateus Bogusz going to be there, or is that sale going to come through? There's also still some question marks around players who are in that quote unquote starting 11 right now. So I think LAFC, again, just kind of like the Galaxy, got to keep an eye on them heading into training camp starting in a week or so. All right, Inter Miami. We're just hitting all the big names here. We're hitting all the big clubs. I'm not really going to talk about any players in, but I think I just want to quickly mention 2 players out. Jason, Diego Gomez, obviously one of the standout young bright stars of 2024, officially sold to Brighton and Hove Albion for $15 million. According to Tom Bogert, that number could go up to just north of $18 million if certain incentives are hit. But congrats and shout out to the 21-year-old Paraguayan international. Again, Inter Miami, just as much as they have Messi and they win, you still have to develop and sell and build that reputation, and that's what a Diego Gomez sale does. They also traded Leonardo Campagna to the New England Revolution for a MLS record $2.5 million in GAM. Potential for that to increase another $750,000 in GAM, and a sell-on percentage and an international roster spot. So they had to clear up a large salary of an Ecuadorian international striker who at this point was the backup to Luis Suarez. So that's 2 key players gone from this team that won the Supporter Shield in 2024. And, I think 2 big talents that are probably going to better places for their own career path.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. Leonardo Campagna going to New England's better for his career.
I think
I would maybe argue against that. But
he'll be the starting striker.
Right.
In front of Carles Hill. That's pretty cool.
That's fair. Yeah. Is he gonna, yeah. I mean, we'll see what New England's doing.
He may win less trophies, but he might score more goals is pretty much what I'm getting at.
I think Miami needs a striker now, right? Like, backup, whatever. I was wrong about Suarez. He was way healthier than I thought he was going to be.
Not just you.
Yeah, I mean, hey, I'll admit it. He was way better than I thought he was going to be. He played way more games than I thought he was going to play. But you can't go into the season with really just him, right? Like, that just seems like not a great idea. But yeah, I mean, big names out, a lot of money in, which is like, oh man, Inter Miami just got a huge payday. Like, for everyone else in MLS, like, yeah, that's rough. We'll see what they end up doing. I'm sure they're going to do something crazy with that money anyways, because who doesn't want to play with Messi?
Exactly. Hey, Neymar. The rumors are circling, Jason, that MSN could be back together in southern Florida, but we will see. Again, I think Miami's kind of similar to LAFC. I think the starting 11 super strong, but you want to win games, you want to win continental competitions, and we talked about it to start this episode. They're playing in the Club World Cup and CONCACAF Champions Cup. You need bodies, and you need talented bodies if you want to win them. All right, let's keep it moving. Minnesota United. I'm going to keep it pretty short and sweet here. I kind of wanted to just quickly mention Miguel Tapias, that Minnesota did sell Tapias to Chivas Guadalajara for $1 million. He played 27 games last year. I thought he was a pretty just good, bang average, above average center back in Major League Soccer. But the key of what I wanted to talk about is they signed him for like $100,000 or like $150,000. Now you're selling him 2 years later to Chivas for $1 million. That's pretty good profit,
Good business,
profit return there for Minnesota. So shout out them. That's all I really wanted to say about Minnesota so far. Otherwise, it's been quiet. But you go if you got something else.
Shout out Kip Keller. Like, I was so convinced this guy was going to be amazing when he was drafted. This is his fourth team? Was he on St. Louis? He was at Austin.
No, he's the guy that did the back pass that allowed St. Louis to score.
That's what I thought. Yeah, so it was Austin, St. Louis, Cincy.
Yeah, Cincy. Yeah. This is his third. Yeah.
You know what? I still think he's got something in there. I think he's got something in their tank there.
We still might be the biggest Kip Keller podcast on this planet. I think that's a truth.
Come on down, Kip Keller. We will talk to you, and we will love you.
All right, let's go up north. You said you wanted to talk about Montreal, Jason, so I'm going to let you have it.
Yeah, I mean, I think we texted about this a little bit. I like what they've been doing. I think, first of all, from someone who watched a lot of Fire games, been to a ton of them, Fabian Herbers, like, I was sad he's gone. I really like that move. I like him as a player. What'd you say?
It's a friend of the pod, Fabian Herbers.
Yeah, great guy. But that one hurt, him leaving Chicago. I like that. That's not even like the headline though, because like we just talked about Jalen Neal and his success. That move coming in, 21-year-old center back, just was on the MLS Cup winning LA Galaxy. That's a huge move. And then Vrioni from New England, I think is a good move. I think what they're doing and setting themselves up is with Caden Clark there, with Bryce Duke, I don't know.
Rudy.
Yeah, like this team is building.
Are they?
And yes.
Are they?
I mean, you're crazy, man. Come on, give them some credit.
I will give Montreal credit that they are better, that they could be really much in line for a playoff spot and not just like a play-in game or anything like that. I will give them all that credit. But isn't Montreal just doing the same shit we saw like 4 to 5 years ago when they made that Eastern Conference final? They find the distressed assets from around MLS, which is a smart thing to do. I'm not knocking that. They've done that well. They continue to do that well. Again, Clark, Marshall Ruddy, Jalen, Neal, Vrioni, all that stuff. Cool, great. But invest in a scouting department and go get your own damn DP, bro. There's one DP that you spent $50,000 in GAM for. Now, yeah, go get a DP caliber player for next to nothing. I'm all for it. I love it. Great. I don't know if Vrioni is a DP. I don't think he's a DP. That's what I'll leave it at that. But this team got better, sure. And this is better than I think what Laurent Courtois had talent-wise last year. I just have a fundamental issue with the front office. Nothing against the players, nothing against the coaching staff, nothing even against Corey Ray, because I know he's been recently brought into that sporting officer role. So maybe it's more the ownership. I have an issue with the ownership. That's it. I think Montreal's better. I will probably enjoy watching them because I like Laurent Courtois and his system, but that's it.
I mean, I think this is, again, to my conversation about like what – and like there's tiers in this. There's tiers to this league. They're not Columbus, dude. They're not –
I view every team should aspire, and I know it's not the real world.
But you literally started off by saying they're doing what they did 4 years ago, where they made an Eastern Conference final.
Yeah,
are we saying that's bad? They made an Eastern Conference final.
Gonna win that, and then they sold every talented player.
Okay, but if they did, and if they went on to win an MLS Cup, we're having an entirely different conversation. And sure, it's not like an easy thing to do, but we just saw massive upsets. We saw Miami go out in the first round. We saw Columbus go out in the first round. We saw LAFC lose to a weaker opponent. Like, I don't know. I personally think these are fine. These are good moves
They
that
are good.
make them
Are
better,
good.
which is
Yeah.
all they need to keep doing. And you could make the claim like, okay, if they just sell all these people off in or like whatever, then yeah, it isn't great. But right here, right now, going into next season, these are good moves. They improved as a team in an Eastern Conference where I think there are playoff spots to be taken.
I don't disagree with a word you just said. I just think anytime I talk about Montreal, I just have my negative Nancy cap on because I just don't like the way they function. Just go sign another fucking DP. You had Victor Wanyama sitting on your books for 3 years. Go sign another DP along with Vrioni. Then I'll say at least you gave it a shot. But whatever.
I mean, I think your points are valid. I just personally think like what not every MLS team, especially a team in Montreal, is going to be operating at a LAFC Inter Miami level. Like it just isn't. It's just isn't the same. They're not the same.
Cincinnati.
They never will be the same. That doesn't mean they can't win. That doesn't mean they can't make their moves to try and be better. But like I said, I think there's playoff spots to be taken here.
Yeah. I don't disagree with you whatsoever on that front. Whatsoever. All right.
That was a passionate conversation.
We're back, okay? This is energy. We're an hour and 15 in. This is what I need. Let's try to move quickly through some of these. Nashville, I think the biggest move there so far is Shaq Moore. We kind of already talked about it. It's a big hole. Apparently, Andy Nahar is reportedly in. He'll probably be that replacement. Shout out Andy Nahar back for his third stint in MLS.
Justin Brugman, that's pretty decent.
I mean, sure. Fine. I mean,
I'm done, man.
We're back, Jason. This is
New England. You know what? Big moves. Let's move on. whatever Caleb Porter's doing, let's just hope it works because another season that New England was so bad.
The thing that I was going to say about New England, Jason, is for the podcast of 2025, Tom, I'm going to try to do my best. This is my New Year's resolution of dropping 2 episodes every single week, our standard Jason and I conversation, along with about a 30-minute interview for a second episode every single week. So I have already one pre-recorded first one where I talk with Caleb Pongratz, covering all things New England. We will dive super deep. It's an all New England Revolution conversation, so we will dive into that. In when Jason and I determine when we're going to drop that interview. So
the amount of moves they made needs its own podcast.
That's pretty much kind of where I want to leave that. So I think that's a fair, that's a fair point along with it.
And we've also talked about some of these from other teams. I do like the Jackson Ewell edition, but
Jackson, yeah. I gave my thoughts on that interview. So if you have anything you want to say, New England.
No, I don't. I put a lot of faith in them last year and they let me down.
All right. Let's skip over New York City because we already talked James Sands, and I think that's the key point there. Let's go to the Red Bulls then.
I think Eric's Maxim Choupo-Moting coming in is huge for them. I think we all have a little bit of mixed opinions on Dante Venzier for multiple reasons.
Yes.
He's not as consistent as I think we would want him to be. But this is a team that made MLS Cup and had the chance to win. This is a team that absolutely smashed on their Emil Forsberg signing last season. Sandro Schwartz has got his plan. Like, he was very impressive in the playoffs. They beat some very good teams to get to where they did. I think, while Choupo-Moting might be on the older side, it's not as scary to me as maybe it was years ago. I think it's fine. 35 years old, not that old. He's coming off playing in the Bundesliga. He has a shitload of games played. It's not your necessarily typical, I would say, like Red Bull signing, but I'm not upset about it. They still have Lewis Morgan. They still have Forsberg. They still have Carlos Carnell in goal. It's not going to upset what they want to do that much, which is why I think I like it, because he can come in there and sort of fit into their system. So I think what they're doing is an improvement on a team that made a deep run. I don't know if some of that was great timing, great goalkeeping, but a lot of that stuff is still there. So it's not like they can't do it again.
I agree that I think this team only got better from being a team that was just an MLS Cup a few months ago. Andres Reyes out. You replace him with a guy in Alexander Hack that we probably won't talk about on this episode, but he's a guy who was previously played under Sandro Schwartz in Europe. That's great. You have youth being developed, brought to the first team. Great. The Eric Maxim Choupo-Moting signing. If he wasn't a DP, I love it. I absolutely think it's a home run move if you sign him not on a DP deal. On a DP deal, like I think Choupo-Moting wins the Red Bulls games in the playoffs, 100%, because of the quality that he brings. Do I think over the course of a regular season, mixed with other competitions, does he make the Red Bulls a top 4 team in the standings? No. Does that make sense? Because
they just did it without being a top 4 team in the standings.
But I don't know if you gave me this roster in MLS Cup a few months ago, I don't know if this roster still wins MLS Cup.
Or you mean still loses? Wait, what?
Sorry. No, I don't know if this roster now has enough to elevate to like beating the Galaxy on their day type of deal.
I mean, I don't love the fact that they have 2 DPs on strikers. Okay, like that feels a little bit not great.
That's fair.
But Forsberg has shown that like he can be a best 11 type player in the league. Yeah. And I think once you have that, you're sort of filling in pieces around that where he can be at his best. And I do think Choupo-Moting can fit pretty seamlessly with Forsberg. I think he can be successful with a guy behind him like that with that much talent. And we know Choupo-Moting's finishing is very good. So like
I guess my concern
I get what you're saying, like over a course of 30 30 plus games, like sure, he might not be a best 11 player. But can he get 15 goals? 20 maybe? Like approaching? I think so.
If he somehow pulls Suarez-esque numbers out of his ass, I will be eating my words and I'll own it. And that's fine.
I mean, I don't think he's getting well over 20, but I could see him approach. Like I could see him 15 to 20 goals.
To me,
and if he's doing that, that is winning them games.
A bare minimum for a DP striker in MLS should be scoring 15 goals over the course of a season where there's no injuries. That's to me the number that I like. Obviously, you can talk about styles of strikers and should it be like goals and assists, whatever. I just think if you're like a pure goal scorer, you're a DP in MLS.
And I think Choupo-Moting is a pure goal scorer.
And I don't know if he's getting 15 goals over the course of an MLS season. Now, maybe across multiple competitions, sure, but we will see.
I'm going to keep track of that. Well, they're going to keep track of that, and I'm just going to
yeah, I think he'll keep track of it too. Let's go to Orlando. I think the biggest thing that we should cover is Facundo Torres. Orlando City has sold their Uruguayan national team winger to Palmeiras for, there is no official number, but the report from Tom Bogert was that it is a club record fee that could rise up to $14 million, and Orlando are retaining a sell-on percentage. The previous club record for Orlando City was when they sold Daryl Dike for roughly $9 million to West Brom. So I'm going to guess this is like a $10 million sale for Facundo Torres that could go up to 14 if certain incentives are hit. That's the rough numbers that I would throw out there and feel good about. I'm okay with it. I'm happy with it. Like Facundo was great. I think his time came. He won a U.S. Open Cup. He got Orlando their first MLS trophy in their MLS era. I don't know. I think it's fine. I think you get the payday and move forward.
I mean, I agree. Like I think it's a good amount of money. Move forward, but also do something with the money because you're losing 20 goals. Like. And 7 assists. We just talked about goal scoring DPs. Like,
I guess I was saying all of that with the assumption of yes, Orlando's now going to replace that. But yes, I fully agree.
I mean, it's a big loss, but I don't think it's like a irreplaceable loss, right? But they do need to replace it if they want to remain a playoff team because Montreal is waiting.
Facundo Torres was like the number one player that if we had to put like rankings or like tiers as we've been going with Jason, like I would put him at the top of like the second tier of players in MLS. Like he's not elite, he's not the Messis, he's not the Cuchos, but if you told me he's like that, like really good player, like if that was the tier, like really good underneath elite, I'd put
If
him at
he's your best player, you're in pretty good shape.
If he's your number 2 player, I think you're an MLS Cup contender, but he was their number 1 player. And
I would argue they were an MLS Cup contender, but yeah.
Okay, we can't do this. We can't do this. Episode 1 back in 2025. Let's keep it moving. Philadelphia. I don't know. I don't really want to talk anything Philly, and unless you do, but I think Philly pretty bog standard.
We've talked enough about Philly and their track record.
That's fine.
That remained here.
Portland, pretty much the same thing. Shout out Ariel Lassiter. RSL, they've made a bunch of moves, but I don't know if any are like super intriguing enough right now to dive into. Do you agree?
I agree. Yeah.
All right. I'm going to skip over San Diego really quick because I
feel like we should do like a San Diego podcast.
I think San Diego might need to be its own conversation next week. We'll leave that there. San Jose. We've talked the New England San Jose stuff, and I think that's just kind of the theme of what San Jose's done this offseason. Is that fair?
Yeah, I think Bruce Arena's getting Bruce Arena guys.
I mean, that's what he does.
Is that not what from New England to San Jose, from New England
literally? And when he was in New England, he brought over all his old LA Galaxy guys.
Yeah.
So 100%.
Will he be successful? I think they're going to be better than they were last year. So
yeah, they've elevated the
low bar.
They've elevated the floor of the roster.
Yeah, I mean, again, like a pretty low bar, but yeah.
Yes, 100%. The Sounders, I think we'll be talking about them probably next week again.
Did you see the rumor of Manchester United?
Marcus Rashford? Yeah. Did you see Tom Bogert absolutely freaking out when someone brought it up and he was like, that's not happening. He was like, stop. So yes, Marcus Rashford most likely not going to Seattle. And then, we'll probably talk Sounders a little bit more next week once that, Jesus Ferreira deal becomes official.
Which I think we both think is a solid move.
It's an unbelievable move, especially because I think they restructured his contract and he's no longer a DP.
The actual biggest hole they needed to fill. So good for them.
100%. St. Louis, nothing really there that I'm eager to dive into. And I think the same with Toronto and Vancouver. So we really just kind of cut out half the fucking league after Orlando. I mean, that was just...
people got to be making more moves, I guess.
We need more people.
I say that as like please stop. There's so many.
All right. Well, Jason, I think in an hour, call it an hour and a half for our first episode back for 2025. I'm okay with it being longer. I think obviously as episodes go on, we'll try to hone it back down to our hour, but we had a lot to go over, a lot to cover.
Well, it'll get easier, when there's not 70,000 moves, but
100%.
We also skipped San Diego, who's building a team.
I think next week, I'm putting it out there in the universe, Jason. Next week, let's try to make sure San Diego is prime topic, maybe outside of Jesus Ferreira, but San Diego and Jesus Ferreira, I think, should be prime topic, and then we'll take it from there. So San Diego fans, tune in next week because we'll be talking all about you, what we think, and everything from the expansion draft to the super draft and all the way down. But Jason, episode 1, 2025. Well, not episode... that was weird calling it episode 1. Don't like that. Episode 315, but the first episode of 2025. I'm glad to be back doing this with you, buddy. It's been a little bit. I enjoyed some time off, but I'm glad to be talking MLS.
Yeah, I mean, and like we were saying earlier, the camps and season is right on the horizon, which is exactly exciting and scary all at once. It's the same thing as always. Every single year, you think I would get used to it.
No, you would think, but here we are. The same. I have the same reaction too. I'm like, holy shit, it's so slow. I mean, it's so fast. The thing that I want to leave off the episode with is I would like to get a certain number. I want to hit like a specific number of reviews on Spotify and Apple. I want to start hitting a little bit like more like real goals, not just like so listeners, and this is at the end, so no one's going to hear this, but I'll put it out there on social media. Listeners, viewers of the podcast, whether you're on Spotify, YouTube, Apple, whatever. I want to see like 30 reviews on Spotify and 30 reviews on Apple by, I don't know, the beginning of the season. Is that fair? Is that a fair number? Like the beginning of the MLS season, not games.
Yeah, I think that's. But I mean, I don't know. Like, just review, please.
Review, please. I want to see 30. I'm going to put it by the end of the season, and we'll
End
adjust.
Of the season or start of the season?
Sorry, start by the end of the season. Start of the season.
December.
All right. Well, if it is by December, I hope we do hit that 30 number. But
yeah,
please review. We appreciate it. Obviously, all positive stars, please. And we will see you guys next week for a deeper dive into San Diego and more.